work.
See the countdown. I seen the countdown.
Okay.
That was some pretty good music too.
All right. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
Wow, another Wednesday here. And yeah, we've already been starting out having some technical difficulties this morning with this. So bear with us if we have any throughout the day or throughout the show. It's been an interesting just 2 minutes just to start this thing out with. So I just want to have everyone go around and introduce ourselves today. And Althea, why don't you go ahead and start?
All right. Okay. So my name is Althea. I am the owner of Direct Emotion LLC. You can find me on Facebook, YouTube, and that's pretty much it. Or in the world, I guess. I am a certified emotion code practitioner. I also have the ability to read hands, faces, and toes, which is kind of unique. And I also do oracle cards. So it's just a great way of being able to find out what's really going on with you and being able to resolve it.
Sherry, how about you?
Oh, I'm Sherry Hess, and I do psychic mediumship work, shamanic prayer sessions, and I work with divination cards and the runes.
Thank you, ladies. I am Michelle Adams, or Majestic Michelle, as it says on here, and I work with the Akashic Records. And I'm also bringing back the numerology of the name soul contracts. So what does your name really mean? Why were you given that name? What challenges and negative and positive stuff does your name mean that you need to get through or get to have in this lifetime? And the one thing about the names is that as most women know, when we get married, if we choose to change our name, that soul contract also changes with your name, with your new name. Wow. So we can compare the two names too to see was that name change even really worth it. So yeah, Majestic Michelle.
Well,
so Thea, what are we talking about today?
All right. So this is very interesting to me, right? Because why do we pick the names that we do? And sometimes, like, what is the challenge with this? I mean, honestly, like we in the healing group, we work diligently at not putting a label on things, right? Because we know that when we label stuff, like it really kind of, promotes it. So what happens when people label their children, right? Or what happens when you have a name and all of a sudden everybody starts calling you a nickname? Now, from what I understand is when you nick your name, you nick your blessings. So you nick your potential, you nick all of that kind of stuff. You cut it in half. So how do we recognize what our names mean and how can they help us reach our highest potential? So, Michelle, what about your name? Let's talk about your name for a minute. Michelle. Now, this is your given name. And what are the nicknames that have come along with Michelle?
So, from the time I was born until I was about 12, I was known as Shelly. And it was interesting because as we were doing the session yesterday, it hit me like, wait a minute. Little Michelle was not sexually abused. Little Shelly was sexually abused. And so we had to go through and start all over with some healings because that little me was a different name.
Right. What an impact that makes, right?
Yeah, it does. They're really like, whoa, wait a minute. That is a big aha moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and the biggest thing is when we do stuff like that, like it literally takes us back to almost a restart. Could this be one of the challenges in healing is that maybe we did have a nickname, or maybe there was a name that somebody called us that we kind of went by, and that has a lot to do with it. So let's look at, I don't know about you guys, like you go to the state fair, started a long time ago. You could go into this little booth and you put in your money and it prints out the meaning of your name, right? You seen those? Did you
Yeah.
guys ever get one when you were a kid?
I don't know, maybe.
Well, it's
I
interesting.
think I was a teenager when I was in charge of buying things myself at those fairs, but not really as a child.
Not as a child? Okay. So as a teenager, when you printed your name out, what did it tell you that the name Michelle meant? Or
Michelle means one is who is like God.
interesting. So when you start breaking that down, what is it? What's the significance of that?
I don't know.
So what about you, Sherry?
Well, my first and my middle name is Sherry Lorraine, and it means beloved sweetheart, I found out. Which is stark contrast from what I was called as a child.
Which was not loving and sweetheart, right?
No, it's nuisance.
So when we start discovering what the meaning of is our name, so I was quite shocked, of course, the name Althea, like the meaning behind that is the goddess of truth and healing. And I'm like, okay, well, that explains why people come up to me at random times and tell me stuff that I'm like, I don't know you. I don't know you. Why are you saying that? And so when we start getting that, it's kind of interesting. So what are some nicknames of Althea? Well, there was a lot of people who tried to call me Al. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no. Or Thea. That was, one that I grew up with. And it's like, okay, I don't even care for that one. And then, Althea is quite a hard name to pronounce. So some of my nieces, one of my nieces in particular, called me Feeder. Like, I don't know where that came from, but it was so embarrassing, having her follow you around yelling, Feeder, Feeder. I'm like, I don't know who you are. So let's talk about the power in the name. When we start looking at this kind of stuff, like names mean everything, right? It's your identity. It defines you. It puts your place, your mark in this world, right? It's your fingerprint, it's your footprint, however you want to relate to it. So let's kind of go into a little bit about what the names is. Like there's the vowels and the consonants, and there's also the importance of your birth date that goes along with your name. Now, Michelle, you're kind of bringing back the numerology with your name. So talk a little bit about the significance of this.
So as we all know that numerology has a lot to say with patterns and everything within the world. Well, about 5 years ago, I came across numerology for your name and started really diving deep into it. And it was really interesting because after yesterday's session, I went back in and kind of looked at the soul's contract meeting for my name now, my name at birth, and the nickname I was given. And the nickname I was given and my name now have the same soul contract. The name I was given, the soul contract was completely different. And so it really like going, this is interesting because as I was like going through this, like my name now is the soul's destiny is to become one and not divided within the person. So like for the longest time, I lived this duality life. Like I had my work life and then I had my gift life. And my destiny was to merge those together to become one for my name now. And that was also the same thing for my nickname that I was given as a child, is to not have the duality of life, to only live one. Well, the given name I was given, my soul destiny, was the power, the ability to hear God clearly, to claim and bring back expressions of the power. Which is like, oh, that's completely different than what I'm dealing with.
Right.
And so it's like, if I would have found this like at the time of my divorce, I would have changed my name back to my birth name.
Right. So how has this discovery now, of course, we just are kind of talking about this because of what the discovery was yesterday, like the breakthrough,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like this new insight. And
Right.
it kind of spurred this whole topic of like, what does this really do? So now that you understand what the name is and what it's been doing, what are you going to do different?
Just make sure that I am just continuously living my path, living the one life. So that way this duality, soul destiny is completed.
Oh, very good. Well, okay, so let's talk a little bit about now this is very interesting, okay? So there's I'm going to give a reference to a book. Because this one has really helped me in when I was starting to understand like how do I get the full potential out of my name? Like, what does this do for me? Like, I want this to be like, I want Althea to mean something, right? So I'm going to give a reference to a book that can help not only understand, but also allow you to kind of dive in a little bit and then allow you to go in and heal different things. Okay. So the book is let me get this in the camera. Ted Andrews, The Sacred Power in Your Name. Now, this book kind of goes through the vowels and the consonants of your name. Like it gives you the positive traits, it gives you the negative traits, it gives some meanings of names and everything like that. But it also gives you like the name, your elements of your name. Now, when we look at this, like when we're all encompassing, and this is why I always find this so fascinating, like how it ties together, right? So we discover the elements like the wood, the fire, the air, the wind, and the earth. And how does your name keep you grounded? Or can you see why, oh, I see why that person is having a hard time being grounded? Is because maybe they have too much air in their name and this kind of stuff. And we see these people, and it's funny because once you find out what it is, then you're kind of like, oh, that makes so much sense now, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
so now, so I want to I'm going to give you, because Michelle has an eye in it, and so does Sherry. So I'm going to give you just something out of the book, which is always kind of fun. And then you kind of decide, and you ladies, the audience will be able to see like your agreement or your disagreement with that. Okay. So here are the positive traits of having an I in your name. Healing ability. Would you both agree with that? Self-sufficiency, selflessness, greater love, stimulating, faithful and loyal, active and energetic, demonstrative, intuitive certainty, and outspoken. You guys, those are some. Did you give that?
Definitely.
All right. So now, because we're looking at the positive traits, we've got to look at the kind of counterbalance, right? Because these are the things that it's like, okay, to get the most use out of it, we need to be able to understand all of it. So here are some of the negative traits of having an I in your name. Stifled creativity. Sometimes you have problems creating. Overly emotional. Sometimes selfishness. It's that ability that we need to take, like, I'm taking it because it's mine.
Mm-hmm.
Possessiveness and jealousy.
No.
Sometimes obliviousness to others.
No.
Stubborn. Impulsive and erotic. I'm sorry, not erotic. Erratic.
Impulsive, yes.
Apathetic. Kind of a negative trait.
But yeah, no, not me.
Not you. Distrustful. Indifferent.
Sometimes.
Well, and when we look at that kind of stuff, like, isn't it powerful? Like, you're like, okay, you know what? There is this problem with maybe the stifled creativity. Like, I feel like, oh, sometimes it just slug along, you know? Why am I having this issue? Well, when we
Mm-hmm.
start taking a look at the I in your name, then
Mhm.
it's like, what is the opposite of stifled creativity? Well, it's the ability to create. So if you're having struggles there, then you're like, okay, this is where I need to work. So what is the creative chakra? The root chakra, right? So maybe there needs to be some balance there. Maybe there needs to be some healing done within that chakra. And the other thing is when we're starting to look into this stuff, then it's like this is where the powerful wholeness comes in, right? Because you
Mhm.
can go into your Akashic records and find out what happened or what the significance is of why it was stifled. Did you accidentally do it? Did you do it on purpose? You know, when you go in and you're working with the runes, then you can go in and find out like what can you be aware of when
Mhm.
it comes to creativity. How do you work within that? So, finding out what your names mean is very, very key to understanding yourself better and how to
Mhm.
heal. So, Sherry, what are some of the things that you have experienced in just, I mean, just given this little list of the positive and negatives, like what are some of the things that like just stood out to you instantly with that?
The suppressed creativity for sure. um, I growing up, I was told by a teacher that I had no ability whatsoever, and so I believed that. And then I finally did a shadow work class earlier in the year and finished that up, and really did a lot of healing on the root chakra. And so now I still struggle though. Like when I sit down to make jewelry, it takes me a good 2 hours to figure out what pattern I even want. That really stood out a lot. Sort of the impulsive. And as far as like the healing and everything else, I'm looking at my family members with eyes in their names, and they all had the same gifts. And yeah, that made a lot of sense.
Well, and Michelle, what are the positive and negative? What stood out to you the most in just learning this little bit?
So, the stubbornness. I mean, I am very stubborn. Um, I'm not going to deny it at all. Uh, and I think it's like the main thing is the reason why I'm stubborn is because I didn't have any healthy role models. And so I had to learn young that it was just me. And so it's just
Okay.
like, is that why I'm so stubborn? Like, I'm just going to do it because I can, no matter what, no matter how it turns out. Stifle creativity sometimes. Not as much since I've learned to actually connect to the second chakra and realize that it's our second chakra that is in charge of our creativity, not our first.
Oh, very good.
Mhm.
Well, and I mean, now that to me, it's just like, oh my gosh, you know, when you start learning this stuff, you're like you said, like, you're like, oh, I can see my family. Yes, I can see those
Mhm.
different traits. And it's like being able to recognize like that stubbornness. Like, how did we develop the stubbornness? I think all of us have kind of a tendency to be stubborn, but that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes is stronger in other people than some. And you're like, okay, why? I just
Yeah.
asked for a glass of water, you know, and you're like, oh, you know. Now that's of course taking it
Right?
to the extreme, but when we're looking at this, like, it is so important that you get curious. This is why
Mhm.
self healing doesn't have to be so like, oh, great, I get to discover why I am the way I am. You know, it can be fun. It can be so exciting because new information comes through all the time with your self sufficiency. Being able to take care of yourself in the moments when you need, like, that's highly important because we
Mhm.
recognize that trait or that inability in others where they cannot do that at all. And you're like, seriously, thank God breathing is subconscious because, you know, if you had to remember to do that, like, you'd be flopping around on the ground. And we lost Sherry.
We did.
And it's kind of interesting what happens. Where'd you go, Sherry? She could probably still hear us, but is not. I don't know what happened.
She's coming back on.
Okay, perfect. So it's kind of interesting. Okay, so we're going to get over to the E's, okay, because we all have E's in our name. So let's go over some. And now this is going to be kind of funny reading this because, like, you'll just see my facial expressions when I'm like, "Ew, that's mine." Okay. All right, here we go. All right, the positive traits of having an E in your name. Strong intellect. I believe I'm pretty dang smart. No. Intuitive, logical, philosophical, attracts friends, mechanically minded, inventive, outgoing, determined, persistent, strong, electrical, strength of will, genius, and mystical. Maybe you should change your name to Mystical, Michelle. Now, with those positive traits, okay, keep those in mind. All right, so here's the negative traits of having an E in your name. Hypocrisy, treachery, deceitful, aversion to studying, restlessness, argumentative, narrow-minded, self-righteous. I do not get self-righteous, just so you know. Lack of self-control, nervous afflictions, impurity, easily irritated, stubbornness, dogmatic, and cruel. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit that most all of these I have experienced in my life. I have been one of those things at one point or another in my life, and sometimes a combination, before I understood how bad that was or how detrimental to my soul it was. Now, am I that way today? No, I've overcome a lot of those tendencies. But that, when we are learning how to lie, of course it's deceitful. When we are learning how to not be in trouble, it's deceitful. That's what we're learning. So I think that's a tendency. It's not necessarily something that you are today. And it's not that you are deceiving people right now. It's that
Right.
you have had at some point in your name. And so, Sherry, what are some of the things that stand out to you?
All of them on the positive traits. Like there was maybe one that I was like, no, not so much. But I have had my friends tell me those things about myself. The negative, I do get easily irritated, and it's not the big things, it's little things that are just so stupid that I have to laugh at myself. But I have to say the negatives were very much a part of me, even though I didn't want to be, and I fought against it when I was in a very controlling religion, because everyone around you was the same way. The hypocrisy and the I can't think of the name now. It's just a real gossipy, backbitey, self-righteous stuff going on, But I feel like you. I feel like I've tried to work through a lot of that since then, and I hope that I have.
Well, I believe you have. Michelle, what about you?
So it's interesting because I was like looking through all those negative traits. I've had a lot of that stuff done to me as a child.
Yeah.
And so I was like, no, you don't do this to people. I think it's like during my healing journey, I went to a little bit further on the righteousness trail on the pendulum swing and then came back. Because, when we're doing our healing, there's always that pendulum that goes back and forth until we find that comfortable calm in the middle. And so I think I went there for a little bit, but then it was like, no, you don't live there. But that was the only one that really even stood out.
Well, okay, and so let's take a look at a couple of these because when we are mechanically minded, what does that allow us to do? Michelle, what does it mean, or what does it allow us to do when we are mechanically minded? How does that help us?
So that helps us by being able to see different dimensions and different realities of the same thing.
Mhm.
So I know when I hear things and see things, I can sit there and turn it around into a 360 and go, what are all the parts? And it's just a really interesting concept to be able to view things in that way and to see like both sides of the coin. Like this is the positive and this is the negative. Oh, if you continue doing this, you're going to get this. But if you stop, it's going to give you this type of a situation when you're able to see all sides.
Well, and let's take a look at this because, I mean, honestly, this mechanically minded kind of gets us to be a little stubborn. Wouldn't you agree? Because we're like, seriously, can't you not see all the points? You know?
I don't know about Sherry, but I know I used to until I fully accepted what it all meant.
Interesting. So, Sherry, let's talk a little bit about this lack of self-control as a negative.
Let's not.
Let's not.
Whew.
Don't feel bad. I get this. I totally get it.
I suffer from the perplexing condition of procrastination a lot. And so for me, that's how it shows up more than it does not having self-control. Like I have to control myself enough to get started. And then once I'm started doing something, I'm like, why was this so difficult in my mind to even think about? And it's one of the more embarrassing things to me. So I don't talk about it a lot unless somebody else brings it up. And then I'm going, yeah, I really totally get that.
Well, I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's just funny to me. But
isn't it interesting? Like this lack of self-control sometimes does interfere. But here's, okay, so as we were kind of discussing this, I'm like, how do you turn it into a positive, right? So my own lack of self-control, procrastination, right? I would like walk around the house in a circle, like not wanting to do the dishes or the housework, or, that kind of stuff. Like I can walk around in a circle. Now, how I should turn this into a positive is, well, I did accomplish my 10,000 steps. Yeah, there we go. Because combating the negative, like it's important we have a strategy, right? Because when we have a strategy, it allows us to be flexible, but allows us to implement the positiveness of the situation and kind of combat that negative side of it. But we have to be able to find that positive, which is kind of that strong intellect that comes out with us, right? So too bad I didn't think of that a couple of months ago when I could have been using that to my advantage, right? So
right?
When you think of these traits, I mean, we know a lot of people with E's in their name, right? My husband, Ted, he's got an E right in the middle. So when we look at the placement of these letters, that's also significant. Have you ever thought maybe why they're there? Like, what does the E at the end of the name mean versus an E in the middle of the name? Like, does that give you a more positive, negative balance? What are your thoughts on that, Michelle?
I don't know, because I mean, both of my E's are actually towards the last half of the name. So it'd be really heavy on one side. I mean, good thing there's the I on the other side to kind of balance it out, maybe a little bit.
Yes. Well, Is that well? And it's kind of funny because we can. It's great that we're talking about this because we can all see our names too. So you can kind of see the placement, right, of where the letters are, and that's exactly right. Like, look, I have two A's, one at the beginning and one at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So are you kind of curious about what that is?
Yeah, does it actually balance things out?
Well, let's find out. The positive traits of an A. Ambitious. I am. Intellectual. Versatile. Inventive. Concentration. Aspiration. Truthfulness. Idealism. Sensitivity. Broad-mindedness. Creativity. And organization. The negative parts of the A's. Cynicism and sarcasm. I don't get that at all. Scattered. Lack of concentration. Immersion in sensuality. Or overly critical. Yeah, I do get very overcritical. Disharmony. Hypersensitive. Possessive. Lack of will. Easily hurt. And always planning, never manifesting. I'm like, yeah, I can see all of those traits within me, like all of them. It doesn't matter what side of the spectrum it is because I've experienced all of them. And so, how to start working with that to get that balance? Because again, it's at the beginning and at the end. So I got a double dose from the beginning and the end, like the alpha omega, like sarcasm is in charge all the time. Now, everybody that's been paying attention, like when you think about how we have done past shows, you can almost see those traits come out in us in the past shows that we've done, like the way we talk, the way we explain things, the way we do things, the way we look. And, of course, I'm just like, wow, I really need to work on my sarcasm, probably take it down a notch or two. But it's interesting when we start discovering these things because you're like, oh, yeah, I guess I do that. So how do we start working through that? Michelle, what are some ways that we can start, like, understanding how powerful this is in our life?
Well, if you really want to analyze the name and that stuff, we can sit there and go, okay, what are the negative traits? Is this really in us anymore? And then start working through them because, as we all know, in order to see the light, we have to work through the dark.
Yeah.
And you have to love even the dark side of you in order for that light to even shine. Because we all have the dark. It doesn't matter if it's coming through our name or not, or from the past of our childhood, our experiences, whatever it is that's coming through. We still need to love those parts of us. And sometimes just realizing like, oh, this isn't my name too. Maybe I need to give it a little bit more love more often because it's there every single day.
Well, and that is such a strong point because it is important that we need to understand that maybe we do need to pay a little more attention to this part and give it a little bit more of what it needs. Love, understanding, compassion, apathy, empathy, whatever it is. And then being able to adjust it so that it is getting that balance, right? Because it's all about balance. That's where we have to learn because, well, what's the balance between sarcasm and, not sarcasm? It's half-assed. That's what it is.
I don't know what that is because I can be pretty sarcastic.
So how do we, the sarcasm and stuff, it allows us to laugh at ourselves, really. Because like I said many times, I am one of those people that when I learn new stuff or I'm going to go do new stuff, sometimes it's like I tie my shoes together and then pull my pants down and then try to run. That's how helpful I am to myself sometimes. So, when we're doing that kind of stuff, like, Sherry, how is this going to benefit you learning all this new information? Like, what is the significance of this to you?
I'm still trying to get that image out of my head. I'm sorry, Althea. I just had to take a moment.
Let me tell you, it's very exciting.
Oh, okay. So the significance of all of this to me, I think it's that we have another avenue to kind of understand the human experience, and also beyond that, I think. And also, like, it gives you an opportunity to kind of tease out what you really feel about yourself and work on the things you don't really, that aren't as desirable maybe, but turn them into strengths instead of just saying, oh, well, I'm negative. Well, how do you change that? You know?
Right. Now that is an interesting trait, because a lot of us have the ability to tune into the negative side before we look at the positive side. So in that, like, there's some significance there. So what is about it? What draws us first of all to the negative side? Like, is it just naturally easier to be like, oh yeah, I'm very sarcastic. And then I get self-righteous. And then get a little cynical about the whole thing. And then I'm mad and I'm not doing damn thing. You know? Go over there and walk in a circle and get my 10,000 steps. We'll start there. So when we look at this, like, what does it mean? Why do we tend to naturally look at the negative side before we look at the positive side? Michelle, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I have met a lot of different people, and I have noticed that it's the people that have been through a lot of stuff in their childhood that actually see the negative first. I know, like, people that when they know that they were totally and completely loved by one parent or another, that they actually look at the positive first. Because that's the emotion that they got growing up.
Interesting.
And so it also depends on, what was your childhood like? Like, how were you prepared to look at things? I know my world growing up was not a happy one. It's not one I wish on anybody in this world.
Right.
And yet, I know I have friends that, they've been through stuff, but yet they knew that one of their parents loved them. And so they were able to get through every obstacle in a positive way. It was like my daughter one time, I raised her, right? She looked at me one time and she's like, Mom, if it's not okay, it's not done yet. And I'm just like going, okay, wait a minute here. I'm like, okay, got it. Yep, that makes sense.
Well,
and so it's just like one of those things that, depends on how we were raised.
I agree, because that has a lot to do. I mean, we are all in agreement that our parents most of the times was very ill-equipped for dealing or handling us or teaching us. There's many situations, maybe they came from a survival situation themselves where their childhood was not anything healthy. And so even though ours was not healthy, it was healthier than theirs, if that makes sense. Like, the chain starts being broken because they're like, okay, well, I'm not going to beat you as hard as I was, or I'm not going to make you do the dishes as much as I was made to do them. Those little things. So there's little traits that get broke along the way. But sometimes it is understanding, like, when I look at my parents' names now, then you can kind of see, like, yeah, okay. It was great. It was great, So now, Sherry, what are some steps that you will want to implement, or that you're thinking about implementing, in just learning some of the positive and negatives?
I'm actually thinking of going out and buying that book to research some more. I think some of the steps, is number one, knowing my triggers, and then a lot of times I'm getting a lot better at quickly analyzing in just a few seconds, okay, when do I first remember experiencing that emotion? Because usually I found with me, it's tied clear back to something that I almost forgot about even.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And then I can kind of release that.
Well, and it's interesting. I find it fascinating because of the plain fact that, you know, excuse me just a second. Apparently, I got a dry spot. Um, when we're looking at something, like how much easier is it to identify and to relate and to heal when we understand a trait behind it? Like, because of this is why this. Like, it's learning the alphabet correctly. If you learn it backwards first, then everybody's going to be like, why did you learn it that way? You know? So, what I
Yeah.
want to be able to do, okay, so there's names and meanings in the back of this book. So, I want to kind of talk about some of the names. So, is there a particular name that you would like to learn about, just for a little bit of fun? Just throw one out there. We'll see if it's in the book.
How about Jade?
Okay. J
That might not be in there because it's kind of a different name.
You're right. And okay, I apologize. I am not seeing Jade in this book.
Darn. It was worth a try.
That's all right. Althea isn't in here. I can never find my name anywhere. I look for it high and low. Let's see. Does everybody like? There's got to be people out there that know a Bradley. Okay, let's look at Bradley. This is a name I use frequently when I'm describing people, and I don't know why, but okay. So the name Bradley means from a broad meadow, comma, the good provider. Now, when we think of Bradley, when you just think of the name Bradley, do those the good provider thing, it does ring a bell to me. It makes it, the name Bradley, when you hear, oh, this is Bradley, then you're like, oh, Bradley. He does things, he gets things done, he looks at, kind of a variety of stuff, but it sounds like a very strong name. Would you all agree?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so his suggested affirmation is, I am Bradley. I provide abundance. No, that's quite a powerful statement,
Wow.
right? So let's think of an affirmation for yourself. Michelle, if you had an affirmation, what would your affirmation be?
I have no clue. Um,
I'd be like, I am Michelle. I am one. you know?
Ooh.
And what about you, Sherry? What would be an affirmation that you would pick?
Wow. You know, I have a story for maybe another time behind my nickname and my given name. When I found out my given name and what it really means instead of the nickname, I realized I don't know how to put in an affirmation though, but I realized if that was my name, beloved sweetheart, then I am not disposable. And I felt that way growing up because there was two divorces with my mom and stuff. I maybe just that I'm seen and heard, and it's safe to be that.
I think you should use that because when we are, we talk about the significance, okay? So when is the most active part of saying something like this, right? It is when you first awake in the morning. Like you get up, you put your feet on your bed and you're like, ha ha, I have a rose. And I survived the night. Right? So this is when you should announce, I am Sherry. I am beloved. What is that? That is all encompassing. That is you not being disposable. That is you not being thrown away. That is you being heard. That is you making your mark on this world. You are beloved. Like, who was the only other person that you ever hear reference to beloved?
Right.
right? It's Jesus,
Yep.
right? Because
Yep.
always that reference of my beloved son. Well, okay, if God refers to Jesus as beloved son, then what does that mean for you? You're a beloved daughter, like you're just as important. So tomorrow morning, wake up, or every time you stand up from the chair, then just shout out, "I am Cherry, I am beloved." You know, get that affirmation. Michelle, wake up tomorrow morning and be like, "I am Michelle, I am one." Now we go. You know, and it's like, how do we get enthused about this? Because like when you are enthused about what your name is, like it propels you forward. It doesn't hold you back anymore. It propels you forward. It motivates you. It excites you. It creates that enthusiasm. And I mean, even with this, I mean, when you first got on and we're like, okay, we're discussing the day, we're having a few things go on, we're having some issues getting the technique. Now, how you feeling about it? Feeling more inspired, more activist, more enthused, like encouraged? Like this is awesome, right? So
Right.
this is what we want. We want to inspire you, the viewing audience, to participate in your life. One of the biggest things that you can do in participating in your life is get to know you, right? The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, the
The
bold, the
indifferent.
beautiful, whatever, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is. And then learn what it is. Book an appointment with Michelle to understand what all this has to do with you. Book
Mm-hmm.
appointment with Sherry and know and understand what this has to do with you and what you can do about it. Book an emotion code session and get rid of the stuff that's holding you back in progressing forward. This life is not meant to be stagnant. These are why we have the names we do, is to help us progress forward. Now, when we look at this, I mean, what do you want to do with this now? What do you want to do with this information? Sherry, what do you want to do with it?
I've been doing work with this for a very long time, about 10 years. And I always encourage people to go find out their given name. I usually tell them to do it like in a religious book context because that's usually their background. It doesn't have to be, but that's where I found mine, you know. And so I went from thinking I was just a nuisance all the time and I was raised where children are seen and not heard to all of a sudden going, that's not even who I'm supposed to be, and I'm not supposed to be claiming that over myself. I think I want to just hold that banner up and keep sharing the information with people. And I think it's exciting that Michelle's doing this because I was starting to get back into numerology a little bit. And I'm like, I am so glad that she's doing that angle because I've never seen that done before. So that's exciting.
It is. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
congratulations, Michelle. Like, yay. So, Michelle, what are you going to do moving forward with this information?
So, with this information that we've kind of been talking about today, is just basically when those negative points like do show up, just kind of go, oh yeah, that's why. Recognize it, give it some love, laugh maybe because that's who I am. Because I'll laugh at myself. I'm good with that, and then just move on.
Yeah.
Well, and this is, I think, okay, that's a very good point. Right. We always say, well, you can't laugh at others until you can laugh at yourself. Well, I usually laugh at myself and then I laugh with others. With, not at,
Yeah.
with, you know, because I think we are the best examples that we can have. Like we
Mm-hmm.
learn from our experiences. We learn what we're doing, what we're called to do, and what's calling to our attention. So it's important that even though we have these negative stuff, sometimes those negative traits work out to our advantage. How do these negative traits work out to our advantage? When we
Mm-hmm.
look at some of them, I mean, let's go back to the negative traits of A. This negative trait of, um, well, always planning, never manifesting. Let's look at that. Because how does this serve me? Well, it allows me to come up with great ideas and then let everybody else do it. That's what it does. And then I say, why didn't I do that? you know?
Mm-hmm.
because it's this constant awareness of what it is that I'm constantly doing. Like, how do I do this? How do I, I'm always planning. I do 40-day challenges all the time on my Facebook page, and we're in the middle of one right now. We just started it, and it's like the planning phase and everything like that. This has been my counterbalance to never manifesting, is because now I'm having to do it. It's holding myself accountable for making the changes within, but also like letting other people see my little journey on getting back on track. How does it manifest within you? How does it help you? Because uh, the law of evolution states that it changes internally. It's not meant for you to change other people. They have to decide that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you understand how all of this works together, which in just excites me, okay? It excites me when it can all work together, because it's like all of it is meant for our benefit. Now, people tend to use it in however manner they feel appropriate, at least at that
Mhm.
particular moment. Now, some of us agree with it, some of us don't agree with it, but what it does is it allows you some insight that you didn't have before. So, book your appointments with Michelle. Get this aspect of it. Understand how it can help you, and go into the Akashic records with Michelle so that you can understand the purpose and the specifics behind it. Book your appointments with Sherry, because it's important that you understand what your guides want you to understand when you're diving into this. Like, it's
Mhm.
important. They've got messages, and sometimes we always wonder, like, why nobody talks to me? Well, they do. They just speak in a manner in which you're not yet accustomed to hearing them in. That's all. So
Mm-hmm.
learning about this stuff, like, it's very, very important. And then, of course, book your emotion code sessions so that you can work through and let go of those little negative emotions that are trapping you in not being able to
Mhm.
hear, not being able to understand, or feeling like you're in a circle. And believe me, yeah, I've emotion coded for that several thousand times. Apparently, there was a lot into that, which makes me thorough, I guess. But when we're looking at this kind of stuff, like, it helps us to learn about us, which this is the most important thing. Self mastery is one of
Mm-hmm.
the main priorities, I think, of everybody here. Would you all agree?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
how does our name help us in our self mastery? What kind of things go along with that? Michelle, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, our name helps us by us understanding exactly what our trials and tribulations are and
Mhm.
what our positive notes are. So when we can go, okay, these are the trials, what is it that, oh yeah, this is constantly showing up in my life. This is why. And yet, these are the positive things that I would like to see more of. I see them every once in a while, but they're already in my name. So therefore it's already mine and given. When we can see those positive things in our name that was given to us, it was like at birth, this is yours. Have it.
You come in with your little naked bum and your name. That's what you start out
Yeah.
with.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
everything from there is okay, what do we do with it?
Yeah.
So, okay, so we're going to be closing out the hour with this. And I hope that people are getting the most out of this session. I hope that everybody learns from this. I hope, and of course, everybody feels encouraged that it doesn't have to be some horrendous thing to do self healing. If
Right.
anything, I'm hoping the three of us today have shown you how funny it is when you learn these things, because you're like,
Yeah.
Yep.
no, you know,
Yeah.
and there's nothing better than hearing it for the first time, because you get that raw reaction, like,
Mm-hmm.
and because you're like, oh, yes, that's
Like, yeah.
no, I do not accept that
Yeah.
reality. you know so being able to understand like this, I hope it is making everybody
Mhm.
excited about self-healing, and I hope you start picking your practitioners. I mean, it's important. And yeah, I am always going to put in those plugs. Book your appointments with Michelle, book your appointments with Sherry, book your appointments with me, because it's that ability to take that first step. That's where it all starts.
Yep.
And, to quote Zig Ziglar, he says, I have often found that if a person will not take the first step, they rarely take the second. So don't get left behind. Don't feel like, oh, I'm too old, I can't do this. No, you're not. If biblical people lived to 700 years, you got a few years. It's okay. Right? Like, just use them as your example and move forward. So book your appointments with Michelle. Book your appointments with Sherry. Book your appointments with Althea. It's important that you get this process started so that you can start healing. It's important. You're important. Everybody is important. So let's all be important together, and we'll be really important people, if nothing else. Right?
Yes, definitely.
With closing, Michelle, do you have any closing statements that you would like to throw in there?
I just want to say thank you, everyone, for listening today. It's been a blast. As you can tell, we really do have fun with each other on the show. So, book your sessions with us.
Yes.
Very good. And Sherry, what about you? Anything left to say in the closing of this?
Yes, really quickly. I'm always talking about astrology, but then you have your sun sign. I'm in Aries with a Cancer personality, with a Scorpio moon, my darker side. This name thing makes so much sense because it's fast to the point, and it's very intimate and personalized just to your spirit. I think it's really a good deal.
Oh, it is amazing. And ladies, thank you for participating today. And Michelle, always thank you for hosting these events. I think these roundtables are so important, and these discussions to be able to understand. And it is almost like a quick little class, and I like that. I like the learning. I'm not opposed to learning anymore. I was in school, but not anymore. So with that, everybody have a great day. Book your appointments and know that you're worth it. And we will see you guys next time on the roundtable.
Awesome. See you next week.